Okay, welcome back to another episode of Amplify Your Impact. Are you struggling to align your business with your core values? This is a question that comes up, I think, a lot in the entrepreneurial world. Wondering how to maybe empower your managers or your leadership team to drive business success while creating sort of a positive work culture. There are a lot of catchphrases we're throwing out already early today. Today's guest is a must-add to your Rolodex, and I'll explain why in a moment. We're going to be discussing, how she helps businesses like yours overcome challenges, inspire their teams, and lead with purpose. Because otherwise, what are we doing? That's why we're talking about this on Amplify Your Impact. And if you're looking for solutions to boost your alignment, your leadership, your motivation of your organization, then you don't want to miss out on this conversation. So stick it through. Welcome back to Amplify Your Impact. As you know, this is a show for entrepreneurs who are out to actually change the world with their purpose-driven businesses while increasing their wealth and balancing their personal health along the way. Warning, real life entrepreneurship is raw. So is this show. We record live. It is unedited and unfiltered. So activate your mula bandha and let's go. I'm Josh Biro, the host, and today's guest is someone that you need to know with a proven track record of taking managers and turning them into right-hand people and inspiring many leaders to lead their business with real heart, which sounds obvious, doesn't always happen. I'm welcome and pleased to welcome Miss Sheri Colosimo. Sheri, thanks for coming on the show. I'm super excited about our conversation today.
I'm excited too. We've had several really great conversations that have inspired me. So it's nice to sit down like this.
So we always start out with the most random, inappropriate, borderline question that we can think of just to break the ice. So you got a good one today. We pull it from the hat. If you could magically turn any household item into a sentient being to be your personal assistant, which item would you choose and what tasks would you assign it?
Oh my God. Yeah. The first thing that popped to my mind is my espresso maker. It gets used several times a day. Little insight into how I operate and how I would put it into action. How I'd prefer to spend my time, Josh, is interacting with people. I'm also good at the follow-up, right? The organization, the notes, the to-dos. And I would love if I had somebody who was well-versed in that, who was quick at it, like an espresso machine, who I could just hand that off to and they could do all of my
So you need that other highly caffeinated assistant to just do the stuff as you're going.
Yes. Yeah. Hand it off. Done. Potent.
I've got to say, on a personal note, I've recently rediscovered mushroom drinks, mushroom coffee, not coffee specifically, like a mushroom chaga mix or whatever, because if I don't have that in the afternoon, then I will drink the third or fourth cup of coffee, which I love and makes me feel like shit later on. So the staying caffeinated part, I totally understand. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe for the audience who doesn't know you, give us just the quick, let's start with where you are right now. Who is Sheri right now? But what do you do? What's your MO right now?
Okay. So I'm based in Evergreen, Colorado, which is just outside of Denver. For the past 10 years, I've been doing this work, which is coaching. So the easiest way to put it is leadership coaching. So I work with a lot of owners and founders of small businesses, primarily in the wellness and hospitality industries. And if you could get this vision in your head of that entrepreneur, somebody who has had the courage, the balls to open up their own business, mainly brick and mortar, their time they want to spend in growth mode, that they have a vision for the future and they're usually 12 blocks down the road. And then they have a team who's trying to catch up. So I play two roles for my company, which is supporting those owners and founders in their leadership growth and development. The people who I work with are purpose-driven, they're heart-centered, and that they care about their teams and their communities. So they want somebody who's going to come in and give them honest feedback on where they are in their leadership journey, what their goals are, what their values are, and help them keep making progress forward in support of positive growth for their business and their communities. They would prefer not to spend time training team, which I know we're going to talk about today. They know that their team is essential, whether it be, part-time employees to full-time managers, and they typically don't have the bandwidth, the time, and a lot of times the patience to give those managers, those team members, the skill set that's necessary to fully contribute to the business. So I get to play that middle role of understanding how to integrate these two together so that the business thrives and the people thrive within it.
I love it.
Do you want me to keep going? Because there's a few other things. You want to pause there? I got it.
Let's pause there, because there's already so much to unpack. One of the things that, reading between the lines, that I'm hearing you say that I think is important to highlight is this concept, because we could simplify what we're saying to be working in the business versus on the business. If you're not going to work in the business, someone has to be there operationally to do the stuff, right?
Yes.
One of the things that you're highlighting, though, that I think it's missed, especially in that initial uninformed, optimistic phase that you have when you're an entrepreneur starting a business, is it's not as simple as to say, I'm just going to hire a good manager and they're going to be able to do all the stuff to the bar of quality that I want. That somehow people think that's going to happen, but that is never how I've seen it.
No.
So what I'm hearing you say is that's someone that you have to develop. You have to hire the person to develop and then do that, rather than hire the person to actually do it.
Yeah, 100%. You nailed it. And what I found beneficial, looking back on my last years doing this type of work, is that I get to come in and improve communication as well. There's a lot of unmet expectations because that founder, entrepreneur, owner feels like everybody should have the drive, the buy-in, the skill set that they have. And when that doesn't happen, the blame tends to get placed on that person in the entry-level managerial role, versus me coming in and saying, what are the expectations being set? Is that clear? And does this person actually have the skills, the technique, the experience to be able to carry this out? And if they don't, then I get to pop in and help out with that.
I love it. I think, one of the things that I've often coached to and have gone through in my own experience too, is for someone to succeed in your business, they need to know what success looks like. So there's the expectations, and then also they need to have the capability to succeed. So that's both have you given them the tools, and by extension, the training for that to actually even be possible. Otherwise, what's the expectation? I expect you to do a good job, but I really can't do that. So,
the other piece that I really love about this work, Josh, is holding space for both sides. There's always the tension within a workplace. And I get to hear both sides and help see the other person, see the other side, where a lot of the time that gets cut out because a manager who's coming in doesn't feel like they're in the place to talk to the owner about how they're feeling, where feelings have been hurt, where training has not been taught, and then vice versa, where an owner and founder just wants to let it rip because they're in a stressful situation and they feel like somebody's dropped the ball. I get to really go in and look at the big picture of what's happening and help resolve some of the conflict so that everybody could keep moving forward with flow.
Yeah. So here's a question that comes to mind. We're going to get right into it. Just I want to hear a little bit more, some origin of this stuff too. But is it that, because here's one of the thoughts I've always had is, if you found someone who is that unicorn employee who's going to manage your business to the same quality level as you, they already own their own business. They're probably another owner somewhere. So it seems like it's unlikely to just go and find that person and hire them and have them do that stuff. So do you think that there are certain people who really do find their enjoyment of being the person under management? I mean, like they really want to just be the integrator role and you tell them what to do and whatever else? Or is it like a path that people are on, that's a phase you go through in your own entrepreneurial journey? And the reason I'm asking is I feel like from the owner standpoint, if you knew this is what makes this person tick, this is what makes them happy, and then I'm going to support them in that way, but it also puts a ceiling on your expectations of that person. So it's more realistic. That could be really empowering.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do find in 10 plus years of doing this, and then we'll talk about the origin before that of working with managers and actually being in the role of training them specifically underneath me. This role that we're talking about, and you labeled it perfectly, it's integrator. That's what most studio owners are looking for. An integrator is someone who can see the vision, can see the big picture, and they could take all that information and make it really practical and actionable today. That they actually have a love, a passion, and a skill set for the doing to ensure that this goes from this conception idea all the way carried through every step of the way being checked off. I find it to be rare that somebody just holds that skill set. I feel like it's something that has to be developed, and it has to be something that an owner is looking for, and that they have the right interview questions and conversation questions to be able to suss that out. Is this person who's solely a doer, which is a great role to have within a studio? Or is this person a visionary, like they're the ones who actually have all the creative ideas, yet they can't land anything? Or is it this person that with some development and coaching and hands-on support can really be the glue between the two?
Yeah. I like that you're highlighting these three levels. I mean, to stay on that train of thought, I always look at it like there's the doer level. You're just doing tasks, you're just doing the stuff. There's the manager level, which is where like you're managing those doers and keeping the machine going. Then you get to like leadership level, which is where you're actually building the machine. You're actually considering macro strategy. And then above that is the CEO or the visionary level, which is like the compass, like where are we even going? And I think a lesson I learned some time ago and continue to relearn is just the skill set for someone to be at a leadership level is a different skill set than to be at a manager level, which is a different skill set to be at a doer level. So I think we want to ascend people up the ranks, and sometimes that's possible, but sometimes it's not. Like, it's like you can be a really great doer and you're just going to be a shit manager.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So do you find, you mentioned interview questions and stuff in your work, are you helping people ascend up into these more like management level roles, or helping identify that person, or hiring for it and then training? What's a more typical situation in your experience?
For me, the typical is assessing skill sets and ability within established company. So I tend, sometimes I'll help with the interview process, which I like to be able to be there from the beginning to help owners and founders, or whoever their leadership team is that's hiring, understands what you're looking for, that the expectations that you have for this role are getting translated actually verbally to the questions that you're being asked in the onboarding process that you have. But to be specific, I tend towards going into an established organization that has a need to up-level people. They have somebody, one or two people pinpointed, and then I get to go in and give my unbiased, I'm not going to be affected feedback of sitting down and having the conversation. So it's like a post-interview process, if you will. They're already there, I want to be elevated. So I get to assess if I feel like there would be the right fit for this role. And if they are the right fit, what training and development they're going to need to be in there, and what that process could look like, either with my support or with current team support.
Yeah. Has it happened where you assess someone, you're like, this is the wrong person, like they're not going to do this?
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
I mean, I assumed as much, but just I think people don't like to talk about those scenarios.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And sometimes there's they heed my recommendations and sometimes not. It has to be a learning process. And I have no doubt that, I'm coming in just from my perspective, right? I try to be as
Right.
holistic and unbiased as possible. So it's like, here are my concerns when it comes to this person and why they would be better skilled for this type of role versus where you're leading them towards. Here's some things that might pop up for you as big rubs when you're trying to even develop them.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe, can you zoom us in a little bit on that? Like, I'm sure someone listening to this is curious about, okay, I've got this person, I want to them to this role. What question do I even add? Like, how do I even decipher if they're going to be good for that role or not? What would, on the macro, like, are there certain categories of questioning angles that you would take? How do you approach that?
Tell me if this answers your question. The owner or whoever is going to be leading this team, this needs to be a conversation from day one. Like, this is not like I have a need and now I have to try to fill it. When I was thinking about our conversation today about developing managers, holding on to great managers, like, what does that take? And where was I successful when I was doing this? I think about the relationships that I had, knowing that this person who is floated into this role, I'm going to have them for a period of time. It's probably not going to be forever, right? So I get to mentor them and coach them based on my need, as well as their strengths and their interests. And this is changing all the time. So it's not like I'm going to be surprised by the time I need them for a different role, or I would like them for a different role. Like, what's going to happen here, right? So a specific question I always ask is, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go, and how can I support you getting there? I see that that you like to spend your time here. What other areas would you like to spend time? If an owner, founder, or leader is really watching their team and has regular interactions to find out why they're doing certain things, what's working, what's not, what's hard, what's easy, what brings them joy, what's a conflict for them, then they're going to have more intuitive answers on where this person can go. Additionally, just asking the questions, right? Like, we have a need coming up for someone to elevate into this role. Here's why I see it's going to be a great fit for you. And then giving them that list of where it's going to be a great fit. You're so great when it comes to interpersonal communication. Anytime there's client conflict, you're the person who really steps in and has such ease in those conversations. And then here's where I feel like there might be some need for training and development, and for us to really sit down and dig in terms of where there might be barriers. I know that when I've watched when you're in sales conversations, there's some apprehension about talking about next steps for membership. I'd really like to sit down and dig in to figure out, what are the barriers for you? And if this is something that I can support with, because this is a huge key part of this role that I think that you would be interested in, and it would be a nice elevation for you. So I guess what I'm getting at, Josh, is like transparency all along the way, because that's what I'd want from team members. And I know from experience, that's what they want too. We don't need to hide anything. Everybody just wants to know exactly where they're at within an organization and how they could be of best support.
I like how you're wording it, transparency along the way. That to me resonates better. I recently interviewed for some roles in our organization. And one of the things that 9 out of 10 interviewees said when we talked about communication was that, I believe in over communicating. We're going to over communicate all the time. And I thought it was really interesting. Like, this is clearly a trendy thing to say at this point. And I'm like, I don't think I want you to over communicate with me.
I don't have time for that.
What I want is transparency. I want you to just give it to me straight about where you're at and what you want. And I need to be able to do that with you as well. Yeah. So I like the way you're wording that, because that, to me, we only need to talk when we need to talk, but it needs to be real. Over communicating doesn't help that. Yeah. I'm just kind of laughing to myself thinking that. Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a few other notes or questions that come up from this, but backing us up for a second, what would an example be, or do you have like 2 or 3 top like red flags if you're talking with someone on the team and you're like, okay, Josh is going to move into this sales role or whatever it is, or the manager role, I think is dominantly where people want to hire the most in my experience. What are some flags that you've encountered that people should be aware of?
That's a good question. You know, I just think what comes up for me is just is action. You know, I feel like everyone can see it, but it'll, I think when I talk to owners and founders, they have it in their gut. Like, this is not a fit, or there's something challenging here. And then they just insert time. Time is the fix, right? That if I give them longer, this will resolve itself. You know, they have some aversion to conflict because they don't want to step in and have to manage that. This person said, yes, they're going to do it. So I just have to trust that it'll eventually happen. So I think the red flags are more with the owners and founders versus team members, right? Because it's our responsibility to hold them accountable for what they said that they were going to do, right? It's obviously co-responsibility, but I hired you for this. And one of those promises that I made when I hired you was that I was going to develop you, that I was going to hold you to clear expectations. So I think it's, for me, when I think about this question, red flags, it's really the owners 9 times out of 10 not stepping in, just saying, oh, it'll get better next time. Next time I'll have the conversation look differently. And the red flags for me are when after you have a conversation, you know, we have this in our software system that you're going to do these follow-up calls with these people. I see that over the last couple of days, they haven't been done. What's been happening? Oh, I've been busy, or I just didn't get to that. I was doing this instead. And then it's my responsibility as their mentor to say, let's take a few steps back. And I'm going to get clear again on like why this is important as your number one thing that you do, because I don't feel like I was clear enough the first time. Resetting expectations. And then the red flag would be them saying, you know, you asking for their buy-in. Does that make sense? Where do you see, you know, this something is going to get in the way of this? Where can I provide more training? You just want to keep grabbing for them to say, this is what I need. So if there's 100% buy-in in that situation, the red flag would be, it happens again the next day. It happens again. And, you know, the same reasons where it's like, okay, we need to reassess here, versus feeling like a conflict is going to make this person feel bad. I don't have the time to train them on this. It'll get better over time. Yeah.
Yeah. Or even I've had the personal experience, but on the ground in some yoga studios training too, where someone just like straight up, we go through the process that you're talking about like, here's why this matters. How do we help you succeed? Is there any reason why this couldn't happen moving forward? And at that point, they're like, I'm not going to do this. Mm-hmm. So that's not even a flag. That's just actually I respect that, because then they're like, cool, they're no longer in this seat. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's interesting that you're saying that, because I think owners really want to know. They're like, oh, this was the sign that I should have seen before. But it's interesting that might not be it. It's more about how you behave, and it's going to shake out appropriately, is what I'm hearing you say, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the actions they take and keep that accountability. Yep. Yeah. What is that? What's your experience with that? So I've been doing this for over 10 years too. And this like conflict avoidance that is common as the owner in the entrepreneurial world, especially if we talk about, it seems to me to be amplified when we're talking about these like really passion-based businesses, you know, a yoga studio, your Pilates place, whatever. It's more likely that they're conflict avoidance this way, even when someone's clearly not doing their job. Like, what is that? Is it a skill question? Is it a personal like, where's that coming from?
Oh my God, this is my favorite, Josh. This is where I spend, I would say 50% of my time working with owners and founders, is being in these conversations. Everybody knows that they need to happen, and there's a lot of resistance to it. And the first thing I wrote down was time. If we think about that typical owner founder, like this is team development is just one out of 100 things on their plate. And you don't have to rewind the conversation we just had, but it's just like, it'll get better. Somebody else will fix it. This was just a blip. So it's just like the time it takes. And I think people think it's going to be this huge conversation versus the time I know it takes, which is just, we'll resolve this in maybe 20 minutes now, so that I don't have to keep handling this, the mental load that comes with having to handle this, and the actual verbal expression of it. So time is number one. And then two, I think it depends on the person, but in my experience, I work like you with purpose-driven, heart-based founders and owners. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. They don't want to be misinterpreted. They don't want people to feel bad. They want to be in a place of empowering their people. And they feel like this conversation is going to be in conflict to that. And they don't feel like they have the language and enough experience to have these conversations. So that's where I come in, so that I can give them some ideas from a really non-emotional place, right? Because a lot of these conversations, when you have put all of your blood, sweat, and tears into this brick and mortar yoga studio, there's a lot of emotion that typically goes with it. If you feel like this employee has not met expectations, that things are sliding downhill when it comes to revenue of the business because the sales team is just not doing what they had promised to do, there's some charge that goes with that. And I get to come in, help them release that charge by just listening to the conversation and affirming like, yeah, that's really tough. And then have them see it from like, let's take all of that out now. And what is the conversation we actually need to have, and having them practice it.
Yeah.
I love being in these conversations because I've seen the result on the other side, which is just, I get educated because I go into a conversation like this going, I don't know everything. I don't know everything. And I'm going to have a lot of generous space for what the person's going to share on the other side. There's probably something I don't know. I have some involvement in the situation, and I feel like that simmers things down. And then the result of the conversations I've had is just improved relationship and communication. But you can't get to that unless you have the experience of it. So I like to help owners and founders just get more practiced at it.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least in part, it is a skill. I mean, I would say for myself, certainly I've experienced that too, that like I'm better at that kind of conversation now than I would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And will continue to get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a little bit of a tangent too, that I'd be curious about your thoughts on. I had the feedback once personally that in coaching this, that because I'm a confident white male, those are the exact words that were used, I'm able to have these conversations, like the non-emotional, strong, overconfident conversation that's might be necessary, and that they weren't, or that some owners can't because they're not that situation. They're a female, or like had a different upbringing or different experience level on it. And it really curveballed me. Like I was like, wow. I mean, sure, my life experience has led me to be good at doing this, but they were using that as the reason why even the methodology of like going directly at a conversation like this should be considered differently.
Do you want my feedback?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about your thoughts on it. Yeah, it's one of the few times I can think in this, around this subject matter where someone brought something up where I was like, I've got no, like, just totally blindsided me.
Yeah.
Altogether, like totally new perspective.
Yeah. And I love that they gave that to you, and you're still thinking about it today, right? I bet it has informed even your coaching to this day on how you interact with people, whether there be truth to it or not. When it comes to feedback, for me, it's just about intention. Like I'm sure that I could come across that way too, right? If I wanted to come across as all-knowing, confident. This is the way it is. I have all the information. You are wrong. I'm in power. End of conversation.
Mm.
Versus, I know that I'm a participant here. I know I don't have all the information. I want to be able to sit and listen so I understand your perspective, your experience, and what you need here. And for us to reset expectations and learn from one another. I just feel like those are two different things. And for me, it's not the confidence comes from, I'm confident in knowing where I'm coming from, that I want to listen and connect to this person, human to human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the confidence piece for me, that I know that if we choose to do this, like be here human to human together, like really wanting to like learn and understand versus judge and blame, that we're going to have a productive conversation. If one person decides to go a different way, I mean, we could go into that conversation if you wish, like you have all the best intentions in the world and the conversation still fails, right? What do you do then? But from my experience of chatting with you over the last couple of months, I know where your intentions are when you're interacting with people.
Well, I think, I do want to dive into what you're saying. What if you have the best intentions and it goes sideways? Because I've been there in the conversation with it, like an owner with a manager or a manager with a employee, and like they actually handle it very well and their intentions are good, but egos get in the way, the emotion comes back in, and this whole thing does implode. Before we jump in on that, one of the things in sales training we always talk about is, if I say salesperson, immediately used car salesman or something comes to mind. Like, it's always what people come up with. And so when we unpack why and like, how do you feel about that person, what we arrive at ultimately is always, this person's intention is to take something away from me, not to serve me something.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I will resist them because I don't want you to take something from me. Like, that's a human nature thing. So the first way to be a really great salesperson is to help someone see that your intention is to help them, is to serve them, not to take something from them. And if you can make that happen, if your intention is well known, then even the same words will be met with a different type of consideration and response. So I like what you're saying. Is it the same concept, that deeper intention behind what we're doing? Yeah. Okay, let's say you do it perfectly. You record yourself and you're auditing it afterwards and you're like, my tone was good, my body language was good, my words were good, fucking nailed it. But still, it just goes sideways.
Yes.
Yeah, what then?
Oh my God, this just happened with my husband and I. I was like, thinking in my head, like, I'm handling this really well.
Oh shit. Yeah. If you're married, even if you're not an entrepreneur, but if you're married, you know what we're talking about. This happens for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Think about it, right? Partners, children, good friends. You're like, what is happening here right now? Yeah. I mean, I think you have to go into the situations knowing that, this is two people and you could have the best of intentions, yet you don't know where the other person sits, what kind of day they had, what's going through their head, self-judgments, experiences of receiving feedback and being in these conversations before that are affecting how they're listening right now. So I always, when I work with owners and founders on this, having tools to remain calm is one of my biggest tips, because once you find somebody is escalating a situation, whether it be their energy, their body language, verbiage that they're using, our natural tendency is to want to come up. And your goal as an owner and founder, leader in the situation, is to stay here and to have some really good next step language to be able to utilize. It's like, okay, I've said this so many times, Josh. It's like, let's pause for a second, because my intention for this conversation was this. And I really feel like we're ending here. And I just want to take a pause for a moment, because must have been something in the way that I was handling this conversation, something that I said that the outcome is not what I desired. So let's just pause for a second. And sometimes that's just going to resolve it because the other person's like, oh, they weren't, they
Right.
weren't
The awareness is just there.
pause, right?
Yeah.
Or if I feel like this is, I'm going to rewind back, knowing, one of the keys here, Josh, is to ensure that you're setting yourselves up for success in terms of timing for this conversation, that it didn't happen right afterwards where everybody's feeling a
Right.
little disrupted or in a state of shame or blame, that you're removing as much emotion and charge by putting physical space, like having the conversation the next day, getting the other person's buy-in, like, hey, I want to have a conversation about what happened today. When would be a good time for you? So that there's buy-in from both sides, like, this is a good time. I am being personally responsible to come into this conversation as level-headed as possible. And then the last thing I'll share, and I'm happy to give more because I do love this, is if the conversation starts to go sideways, maybe I share those conversation starters of, hey, this was my intention, here's where we're at. Or I might just end it saying, okay, I'd love for us just to sit with this information because here's my desired outcome here, that you feel supported in your role within this organization, and that I'm giving you all the tools possible for you to be successful given these responsibilities that you agreed to. I'd love just for both of us to take some time tonight to think about this. May I contact you tomorrow to reschedule a time for us to revisit this conversation, knowing that nothing has to be resolved today, okay? That if something, you don't want the conversation to continue to get elevated just so you could complete it, that there's such healing and such information learned when you create a pause in conversation.
Yeah, just having the space for everyone to cool down a little bit, but also to recalibrate. I mean, one of the things that I'm interpreting what you're saying, which I love, I often say, again, in sales conversation, same thing though, you point at the elephant in the room. Like if you're having a sales conversation with someone and it keeps going long enough that now you suddenly get this sense that the person you're speaking with becomes too hyper aware that you're in a sales conversation, and that they start to put that wall up. It's like you stop and be like, hey, straight up, this is my intention with this. Like you just like point right at it. I know I'm continuing on this questioning line or whatever, but it's because this is what I'm trying to do. Or my mission is to do this, or I want to help you in this way. Like you just point right at it. And that, I don't know, the sort of meta element of that helps people just like wake up again almost or something. So,
yeah.
Okay, I've got, go ahead.
If it's useful, Josh, we could link it. I have a great just freebie that I could give to people in leadership positions like this about constructive conversations, being able to give feedback effectively, having, a really useful conversation that's meant between leaders and the team that they're developing.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I think that would be great for anyone listening. Just having those, sometimes little turns of phrase or little formulas are just an easy way for us to have a plan going into it, I think, too. So here's another thing that I experienced that I feel like is hyper prevalent in the yoga world for sure, but in the larger entrepreneurial world does still happen. And I find it super fascinating because it's very high school, there's these like dramas and narratives inside organizations. And the reason why I think they matter from the owner's perspective, especially, it's like, if someone is like the source of this like storyline that really isn't true, then they have this feeling, this emotional response of like needing to defend themselves against this narrative. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen what I'm talking about. Like, how do you handle that? And like, is this something, do you have any thought of like why this happens even? Like, sometimes I'm confused why someone within a business would even put the effort into trying to influence other people by making a story or what, I don't know.
Oh man, do we have like 5 hours for human behavior?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think it's again, just knowing that that's going into owning a space and knowing that that can happen. Right. And I rewind it back to owners, leaders staying involved with their teams. I find that there's going to be a lot less drama, storytelling, conflict when the person that they chose to work for, there was some belief there, right? Within the organization, within the person that hired them on, that they want to do a great job for. A lot of times owners and founders start to disconnect as they get their teams involved. And there has to be some way for them to stay plugged in to that team, whether it just solely be on a personal level, doing that check-in, like, how are things going? What do you need? What's been hard around here? How can I best support? If I was to, show up, an hour a week just to be a part of this team, what would you like that to look like? And slowly those stories start to get silenced because that person who has positive influence is there, starting to break up those stories. Additionally, I think it goes back to that conflict conversation, Josh, where you hear about these things and the answer might be, well, this always happens, right? This is going to happen with an organization. There's always going to be a person who's saying something, versus handling it immediately so it doesn't grow into something else. Because that one team member then starts to branch out and affect how everybody else sees the business. So being able to have the confidence to address that right away, like, here's what I've been hearing. Can you tell me what's going on here? Where is this coming from? What am I not seeing? How can I best support you? Like all of those same questions again, but it has to come from a place of just wanting to know and understand and support.
I like the technique that you're describing of basically reintegrating yourself into the conversation so that there's an alternative narrative that's possible. It's like if you aren't part of it, then it takes up a whole thing of its own. Mm-hmm. I have seen it on occasion where the quick backstory is, for a short time early in my yoga career, when I was first managing and opening yoga studios, there was a mentor at a studio that I had, and he very infamously, in the area that we were in, bought a studio that was failing and proceeded to come in and immediately just fire everybody. Yeah. And in hindsight, it was actually, it was harsh, but it was the right move, because the major problem was the team was didn't have a plan, wasn't integrated, like it wasn't right. So I always think about that from like this shock moment, that it made things really terrible for a very short period of time, but then that studio thrived afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it was able to rebuild. So is there a time where it's like you come into a business and maybe not firing everyone, but like it needs some sort of a shock therapy situation where like it's just so bad that you're not gonna fix it, and you have to do something drastic and like momentary? Or is it your experience that it is just like this uphill grind that just you got more work to do, but you just gotta stick it out?
So I understand that methodology. It wouldn't be mine, just to come in and fire, and I wasn't there, so maybe it was less.
I've never done it either. It was hardcore. Yeah, I mean, people were pissed, to be clear. It definitely did something not positive as well. Yeah. But yeah.
And I stand behind the notion of your team is the extension of the heart of your business. So if there's not cohesiveness there, if there's not belief and buy-in and a desire to grow and to be educators of that organization, then you either, some teams put up with it because they just need bodies, or I feel like the harder work is patiently bringing on the right people, right? And that's just a harder pill to swallow because it usually means that that visionary needs to insert themselves back into the business for some period of time to be doers, which is hard.
Yep.
For me, this is about knowing what your business stands for, right? We could talk about mission of a studio, core values of the studio, the why behind your studio, and ensuring that anybody that you interview and then hire and spend time training, that they believe in those things. And that you actually have a system in place where they're not these theories out there, but they're actually tangible things that are noticeable, they're felt, they're seen, they're heard within your organization, so that when you're looking for the right people, it's an easier find because you have a substantial foundation of things, values, mission statement that you could propose to people. Like, this is what we stand for. How do you align with this? What can you contribute to this? So it's just, I think, a more black and white yes or no if this person fits within that. So if I was going in and saying, we need to shake things up, I'd be sitting down with each person to say, how do you demonstrate these things? Why are they meaningful to you? How will you bring them into your day-to-day role? Because then it's not personal, like you're a fit, you're a fit or you're not. This is a conversation that you get to keep having.
Right. It's like challenging them to rise to the bar of the business that you're setting. And then they either do or they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My experience on that too is when you do stuff like that, when you hold people accountable to what the business bar is, whatever it is, core values, etc., you don't tend to fire people. Like, people filter themselves out because they're like, this isn't aligned for me either. Like, I'm not happy in this situation. Mm-hmm. So for better or for worse, then you are able to break it off. Okay. Well, then the two other questions that come to mind for me is, there's this narrative of like, hire slow, fire fast, hire fast, fire fast, versus like the necessity that clearly exists as well to develop people within your business. So are these things at odds? Is this idea of like hire fast, fire fast at odds with developing people? Is it one or the other? Is it both? Like, how do you know? Yeah. Do you fire fast, or do you just develop people? You're like, I think this person's good, and you just keep going. Like, what is it?
I think there has to be patience with people, as an owner and founder, you have the clear vision, right? You're holding it. And there's so much accountability on your side of being able to translate that to other people. You can't just keep that inside. So what is your process of teaching somebody what this organization stands for? Some owners and founders are quick to that. They're able to say it. They're models of that. They're highly integrated into studio spaces, so people get to see that and feel like that on a regular basis. I feel like if owners and founders know what their strengths are and they're consistently placing themselves to showcase their strengths, then the development is so much more smooth versus everybody should understand what it means to be a yoga instructor or manager of a yoga studio and just come in and I'm going to pop out to work on the business versus within the business. There has to be a balance there. So I am of the philosophy of knowing who you're looking for, ensuring that you have a system set up to train. A lot of people don't have a training approach. Just like, come in and teach, come in and manage a team, come in and be part of our sales. And there has to be effort put into creating those trainings and executing those trainings. And not a lot of people want to spend their time there, unfortunately. I feel like this has to happen. Precursor to that is hiring the right people, align with your values and your mission, having a program that they go through so they understand, and then having some type of 3-month assessment. So there's a conversation of, how is this going for you? Here's what I've seen. Here's what I felt. What is working for you? What is not? What are the next steps in terms of your growth versus just assuming after 3 months somebody's got it and they're going to continue on without any direction. So with the right people, this development has to be ongoing, which you need to have resources for that. And that's financial resources, time resources, which, are things that I know you work with people as well as me in figuring out like what that looks like in your entire business plan.
Yeah. To me, the obvious next question then becomes, on an individual basis, when is the effort not worth it? So like, when is it that the effort you're putting towards the person where it doesn't make sense anymore? Does that actually happen? Or is it really just an alignment thing that if you find the right aligned person, the effort's worth it and it just takes as long as it takes?
I don't know. I feel like that can be individual, and then I'll give some specifics. A specific for me would be, it's not worth it if you are setting meaningful, appropriate, agreed upon goals and they're not being met. There has to be some type of assessment of, is this person growing within the organization? Is my time being well spent in terms of this training? That at this stage, 3 months in, we had agreed that these things would be learned. There would be practice here. They gave me what their desired outcome is. Like, how will this look in 3 months? What will you be able to do? And I always like to give my managers that opportunity to create those themselves, of course, with my support. So at the end of the 3 months, check-ins all throughout, that if these goals are being significantly missed, then there needs to be some type of a change. And a lot of times the change is just a repurposing of roles. Because if I hired well in terms of this is a good person for this organization, it might just need to be a switch in terms of what they're actually doing if I'm watching their progress all along the way and giving them feedback.
They're just in the wrong seat within the organization,
A
but
lot
they
of the
themselves might. Yeah. I definitely see that as well.
Yeah.
Little hyper specific. So the scenario that happened in this past year, and I've seen this throughout, the yoga world a lot, and the larger entrepreneurial industry. The scenario was, we got hired to come in and train the sales team for a couple of studios. And in doing so, we had to reevaluate sort of how the flow of students were at the front desk during the sign-in for a class, who was responsible for engaging who at what moment in time, and then the practicalities of how you do that and the words that were said. And the thing that was interesting, this was a studio that had been operating for a long time, and a large portion of its teaching staff, especially, they're highly experienced teachers, working there for over a decade of time. So it's that old dog, new tricks thing where they had a way of doing things. And a few of them really they did not like that we were going to change any of the standard operating procedure for them participating in a class. But one in particular, this on-site visit had been booked a year in advance and scheduled. They were told about a sales training 6 months in advance, remind at 3. We also explained the purpose of it and the goals and why it's part of the vision of the studio and blah, blah, blah. And the night before, I worked the sign-in at the desk and no one said anything, nothing. All I did was go and help. That was it. They went and taught their class, left, and then immediately texted the owner and was like, I'm out for tomorrow. I can't come. And it's kind of showing not being a team player. And clearly it kind of came out after the fact that they didn't like that we were working on this. They didn't like that I was there to help them sign in their class. It was very odd. But again, this ego part and change comes into it. So the reason I'm asking this is a lot of what you're describing makes sense and is easiest if you just start in the right place.
Sure.
But what about for a business that's been operating and has employees or has teachers in this case that like they've literally been there for like 10 or 12 years. And now we need to get them to participate in a new way. Because if you were the reason I'm asking is if you were to ask the owner or that teacher, do you believe in the mission of the studio and the core values of what we're trying to do? They would appear to be aligned on that.
Yeah.
But that behavior is a misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna tackle your question of what does this look like for a studio that's been in existence
Sure.
for a while, and what do you do? There's always a chance to start again, and for me, like I think a thread throughout this conversation is that word transparency. There has to be a reason for change, right? We're not changing just because, just to give everybody more work, just to add,
Yeah.
Another line item to our expenses. It's like there has to be a good reason, and the owner has to find their way when it comes to transparency of why there's a change. Why are we, adding on this role or changing names or procedures for this sales team? For the owner, to the best of their ability, to be able to share that with the team so that they can get behind it. That, we have plans for expansion when it comes to this business. We have a need to be able to produce X amount more revenue next year. And after time and investigation and coaching, we realize that our next step is going to be looking at our sales process. And that's why we're going to have this training. So I think that's where I've found the most resistance is there's some new procedure or new idea coming in, and there hasn't been any lead up or discussion to the why. It's just like this training is happening versus we need more cohesiveness with the team. Over the last 6 months, we've been getting this type of feedback on our Yelp reviews in terms of people coming in and not feeling like they belong at the studio, or there's enough interaction, or retail sales have been down. Like to have like the facts and the feelings behind the decision out there for the team to hear, because they're involved in these decisions too.
Yeah, they need the context of it. Yeah, I mean, in this specific instance I'm describing, that definitely happened. Like,
oh, I bet.
Oh, yeah, like all of that was there. And I guess sometimes change is hard. So sometimes I think with an existing team, you're going to get some friction no matter what you do, just because the nature of change is like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the other thought that I was having going back some time back, you were talking about like, you mentioned briefly keeping staff. And I think that when we talk about retention in a business, that's the type of retention that is missed until all of a sudden people realize they're like, oh, this really matters. When I was on stage at a conference last year, I was on a panel and we were talking about staffing. And everyone else on the panel said that one of the top values for hires they had was loyalty. But I had to challenge the panel and say, like, I don't think loyalty is a value. I think loyalty is a result. So that's nice. Like you want people to be loyal, but I don't think you can hire for loyalty. I think you have to hire for buy-in first. But anyways, how do you keep people loyal? And when we're talking about, and here's the more important detail, because I'm sure someone listening to this would say, this sounds great. I know I got to put all this effort into training, developing a manager, whatever. But then we have owners that say to us like, yeah, but it's going to take me 6 months. And then like, they'll probably just leave after a year, which actually is totally possible.
Yes.
So they're like, the cost of the development doesn't outweigh, and it's debatable whether that's true or not. So where they lead to is like, how do we do this, but then make sure the person sticks around longer? Or is that even something you solve for?
No guarantees. Yeah, I agree with your answer in terms of loyalty. I had a really great conversation with a manager of a restaurant a couple weeks ago. I asked to sit down with her because I go to this deli on a regular basis. And every time I walk in, I'm like, what the fuck are they doing here? Like it's always packed. The team members always seem like joyous, talking to each other, remembering my name when I come in, what I like to order. So I just said, hey, can I take you out to lunch? I need to hear what's going on here. And so I asked her that same question. I was like, what are you guys doing here? Because I've been coming here for 6 years and it's all the same people. And she was like, you have to let go of the idea that this person is going to be with you long term. I am in the position as she's operations manager. As operations manager, my sole responsibility is to commit to developing this person while they are here with me. That they're going to go on to another restaurant, to opening up their own business. And I contributed to who they are as an employee, as a leader, as a manager during that time. That's all I can do, because once we start attaching ourselves to, I'm only going to do this if they commit to being here for 5+ years. Like, that's just a battle that we can't win. So that's number one. I love that like line of thinking. Like, one of my responsibilities in this role is to train them, to give them new skills, to pass along what I already know, so that as they continue to grow, they can look back and be like, Josh is a person who contributed to my growth. And it's one of my favorite things, Josh, like biggest compliments. Like when somebody writes me a note, like, I was thinking of you today. I owe a lot of my leadership development to you. And I haven't seen them in 10 years, but I made an imprint on them during that time. So that's number one. Just remembering that we have that responsibility during the short period of time. Two, in terms of retention and that loyalty, is knowing that this is just something that they're doing right now, right? They don't own the business. This is a portion of what they do and who they are. Obviously, it's important to them because they chose to be there for those 20, 40+ hours a week. I want to know who they are as a whole human, and ensure during the time that they're with me that they know that I have an interest and an investment in that they might be a part of my education and sales team, but I also know that artistry, creativity is really important to them. So I'm actually going to ask them like, hey, would you be open to spending 2 hours a week on social media, on creating our marketing flyers, something that's outside their role, but that's going to spark an interest in them, and knowing that they could start developing that. Or speaking engagements, networking is something that they're really good at, that eventually they're in college right now, that they want to get into network marketing, that I'm going to give them that responsibility within the organization. Like, can you, for the summertime, plan all of our events for us? Something that's going to have them feel like they are seen, they are valued, their skill set is getting developed in all of these different ways. And for me, that's going to have the element of retention, that somebody sees them, that they care about them, and they're going to spend resources to develop them in all of these different arenas.
Yeah. I mean, it's very in line with like what you would do with your clients. The reason a client comes into a business is like they need you to see them. Like that's part of, they're not going to come up and be like, hey, I'd really like it if you could see me, please. But that is part of it for good customer service. So that makes perfect sense. I really like what you're saying around figuring out what they're enthusiastic about and then leaning into that more, as opposed to, because I think that a lot of people might look at it as, cool, Sheri wants to do X, Y, Z, but like, I don't have a job for that right now. Rather than, no, by creating something that feeds that a little bit, that is part of your retention technique for your team and keeping 100%. Them happy as well. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Do you ever recommend, or do you use in your coaching, like personality testing, like Enneagram or Colby or Myers-Briggs or any of these sorts of things? Is that a component of it?
I find it all interesting. I'm going through an Enneagram certification right now for me to start incorporating into my coaching, because I find it fascinating. So anything anybody wants to share with me from past like tests that they've done, I love hearing that because I think it just gives me a lot of context. But honestly, how I learn about my clients is just sitting, listening, and observing and asking the questions that maybe nobody has asked them, challenge them, like why? Like when they give me a scenario like, oh, this employee did this and this is how I reacted. And it's like, tell me more. Why? How did that feel? When has this come up before? Because so much of their personality is going to come out just by listening to them explain situations.
We did at our yoga business summit last year, we had an Enneagram specialist come in and everyone at the summit did it. And then we also, with my administrative team, had the same person come back and do like a deeper one. And my wife, Jenna, and I did like a session together.
Oh,
just
good.
because I was so blown away by like, I've done a lot of personality quiz things. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of me, but like this one was so much more accurate in my opinion and shed a lot of light on how we all tick. And I can't say definitively by this metric, our team culture improved, blah, 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 but like definitely we fucking loved it. And I think saw each other better. So
will you share with everybody your Enneagram number?
I am an 8 wing 7. I'm the challenger.
I'm an 8 as well, Josh. Maybe that's why
we're here. There we go. Totally.
Oh, great.
One of our coaches, Terry, she's a 7, like the fun-loving person. And the woman who ran the program for us specifically said, look, like this is your proclivity towards this nature, but we're all of the things. And, as you develop as an individual, you'll become a more balanced version of all of these things. Well, Terry interpreted this a completely different way because she's like, nope, I'm a 7. And anytime she says or does anything now, and yeah, she's like, I'm in this lane. She'll do something, whatever, in a team meeting. She's like, sorry, 7. It's like her excuse for like all existence now, which is also great. What would you kind of listed a couple vaguely there, but when you're asking these questions, like, are there a few questions if someone was going to do this themselves as the owner in the example you're giving and like ask themselves a question? Are there a couple of questions that you ask that you feel like help people gain perspective in a way that they need or empower them in these ways? That, because you're saying you asked some questions maybe they'd never been asked before,
Yeah, I think, and again, I think this, if you could apply it to, I'm smiling because I'm thinking like this, I apply this to everything, like client relationships, my partner relationship, my kids. It's like having that self-awareness before we make decisions, before we enter conversations and connect with other people. Like, number one, what is my state of being right now? So I know like how I'm entering a situation. Where am I like operating out of fear? What is my contribution to this? Where am I lacking? Where do I not have time? What is my desired outcome for this situation? So I think all of those questions, like they revolve around just taking time for self-awareness, because we all come into these roles as owners or as managers, as leaders with different human experiences, from our upbringing to our professional development, and all of those inform how we're going to show up for ourselves and others. So I think it's good to know like what layers we have on, because, ultimate state of being is we have no layers, where there's these pure beings, but that's not in this lifetime. So I know clearly when I'm entering a situation with somebody, like what's going to trigger me here. And so I can impart some tools to soften that. Where I feel like I have fears or I'm placing blame, like as an owner of a studio, it might have been a hard month. So if I'm entering a conversation with my manager, I might have to just notice, like, I just looked at our sales report and it's stunned me. I'm operating from a state of fear. So I'm entering this conversation about something that didn't meet my expectations. I have to know that I have to temper that, because that's mine, right? It's mine, not theirs. And what do I expect of this person? and what information do they need to hear from me so we could have success moving forward. Does that help?
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is do the work on yourself as well. I mean,
always
obvious. Yeah. I love so much, I think that because I spend most of my time coaching directly in the yoga world, we're always relating business to yoga, because everything I know about business, I also learned it from yoga. But this whole idea of introspection and knowing yourself, and then, that awareness, the only better testing ground than a yoga studio or a yoga class is running a business. Like, you have to deal with your shit or it will keep blowing up in your face. And so it's very yogic if you're going to run a business and ask these questions and know yourself.
100%.
Yeah. I want to go more on the personal side for you, but just before we jump over there, we got to get to the big question that we already talked about in the beginning a little bit.
Listen.
So you've got a vision statement, you got a mission statement, you got some core values, but like, that's cool. I think a lot of people write those when they write their business plan, and then that's it.
Yes.
How do you action those? How do you actually action those in your business and with your team and align people to it? How do you make them real?
Yeah. Okay. A few things. If you're listening and you haven't done this, I would love for you to consider having a team meeting and bringing somebody in who has experience with core values to take your entire team through it. I've been coaching based on core values for 10 years, and it surprises me every day how many people don't know their core values, their personal core values. And I think that is foundational before you ask a team member to support a business's core values. What do you stand for as an individual? What matters most to you? What are your guideposts? What are your guardrails in your life? So that you know how to show up for yourself and for others. So that's a suggestion. And then Josh, to answer your question, like, if, a lot of people, you're right, they create a business, they're like, oh, we have to do our core values. Like, let's get these in motion. They have integrity and collaboration and, something else.
Inclusivity.
Yeah. And then they
every studio on the planet. Yeah.
And then they just sit there. And when I work with teams, it's like every decision that we make is through the lens of these core values. So it's great if you don't have 20, okay? I love people to have 5 or less, preferably 3, because it just makes things a little bit more easier to say, when we are going to have a social media presence, in collaboration or in inclusivity is one of our core values. How is that visually represented on social media? What kind of copy do we make when we're trying to have people really feel and hear inclusivity in the language that we use? And I love being able to ask those questions, because if you look at social media, email marketing, the types of classes that you teach, how you describe the classes that you teach, how you're going through your sales training process, it just starts to narrow things in. And there's more meaningful decisions that you can make and conversations that you could have versus comparing yourself to others or having this really wide open field for what is possible when it comes to showing our yoga studio on social media. So that would be my suggestion for owners, like, go back to your core values. And the next time you're trying to make a decision within your company, who you're hiring, the next training that you're going to have, a workshop that you want to offer for your participants, ask questions related to your core values. Like, what would be a workshop that would really exemplify this idea of connection or spirituality or intuition that we have said is so important to our company?
Right. Just actually looking at them and using them as the filter for your actions rather than just something that's nice on the wall or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, during COVID, and the sort of peak of a lot of the rioting and stuff in the United States with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, that had a positive, that was like a positive impact, I think, in that moment, more extreme than we've seen or that I've seen in the industry for a while, because like literally every fucking yoga studio on the planet is like, yep, inclusivity. And we're like, prove it.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. It was, zero actual action towards it. So is it really a core value? So it was a good moment for people to be like, kind of woken up and be like, oh no, if I'm actually going to say this, like I should do something, should action it in some way.
Yes.
You mentioned knowing your personal core values. Like really practically, do you have any recommendations? How does someone figure out their own core values?
Whew. I would love to meet with them, number one, because this is what I dream about. I'll take you through a process. First, I was just working with a client, so I'm going to show you this, and maybe we could link it in the show notes. But there's this beautiful deck. It's called Live Your Values.
Oh, nice.
The two authors, Lisa Congdon and Andrea, they created this deck. It's visually beautiful. And this has been so useful for people. You just spread out the values on the floor. They have a great descriptor on the front, and then questions to ask related to that value on the back. So if somebody needs like an actual visual, that's a great place to start. I have a worksheet too that we could link that really takes people through this process that I will explain briefly right now. The questions I like to ask are, Josh, if you were to tell the audience about a day, an experience that you've had in your recent past where you just felt completely like yourself. There was fluidity in your day. You might even like use the words like joyful, content, grateful. You just felt like there was no interruption to the person that you were. This was a day that you'd like to duplicate as often as possible because you just felt like yourself and that you were contributing. And when you were thinking of that story, I would actually like to listen to it. And then I usually write down some of the elements of that story that I hear. And it's that collection of data that would help me out. In the opposition, I also have people think about a day recently that's been challenging for them, that you're like, please not again. Maybe somewhere during the day, you're like, what the F is happening right now? I need something to change here. And just like that first scenario, if you were going to deconstruct that day, you could see these were the things that were missing from your experience. I didn't connect to anybody. There was no creative work that I did. I was alone. There was no element of support. I might get that collection of data. And then usually people, whether they're working with this deck or they're working with like a list of words, they'll circle a good 40. And then I say, okay, let's have the conversation about core value versus aspirational value. Because usually half of that list is aspiration, right? You know what I'm talking about? That these are qualities that I wish were innately me, that I admire in other people, that I would desire to have those integrated into my personality, my characteristic, but I have to work towards them. Terry, like fun for me is an aspirational value, but it's not something that comes easy for me. Depth, seriousness, getting gritty, like I'm here all day for that. But fun, lightness, humor is something that I aspire towards. My husband models that for our family, but it's not something I could claim as a core value. Core values are something that without needing to put in effort, when I'm in my most grounded, authentic state, this is what somebody else receives from me, okay? So that would be the other things, like get rid of those, put aside the aspirational values, and then you have maybe 20 left. This last process is called grouping or laddering up, that you're pulling together words that feel synonymous with one another. Connection, collaboration, support, things like that. And then you're asking yourself the question, if I look at these words all together, these 10 swimming, what is the one that feels most resonant? What is the one that's the outcome of being in these states of being? And that's usually the one that you could draw from that core value of yours. And then the final part is just testing them, right? Like going back, like going through your day. And in those moments where you're like, I feel completely like myself. I feel like I'm in service. I feel like this is the effort that I'd like to give every single day. Like, what's there? And for me, mine are connection, curiosity, and solitude. And I know that when I align myself with those core values, you will always get the best of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels right. I love this detail. I wouldn't have thought of it this way, of an aspirational core value versus an actual core value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I suppose you could apply that even on the business side too, because I think a lot of businesses,
100%.
part of, yeah, like part of the core values they're writing down are what I would word it this way, and maybe this is like a negative viewpoint, but it's like what they think their core value should be. Yes. Versus what is actually their core value.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, dang, to live your values, that card deck, that sounds really interesting. But yeah, to go through that process, I think I can see the value in having a guide with you, having someone to like force you to go through the process of this a little bit.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, yes for that. I was just with a client yesterday and we were going through his. And it was interesting. Another thing to look out for, Josh, are values that you acquired along the way that are not yours. Whether that's familial core values that were important to your family unit, but no longer resonate with you. Culture values, same thing. Work values that you had to stand up for maybe within an organization. So doing some separating from those to find out like what settles at the bottom for you.
Yeah, I think it's a good call out because I don't know, you could be very influenced by your environment and where you are, you know, living nomadically myself and then having our family, a big discussion my wife and I have is we live in Mexico most of the year with the kids going to school here. Yeah. And so it's becoming more and more obvious that our viewpoint of reality versus our children, because of the cultural difference in how we're growing up, is dividing more and more. And it's really interesting to see. Mm-hmm. So from a core value perspective, there are things that my son understands and values that like would have not been a thing in small rural Canada, like not even a conversation, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, I digress. Usually we start here, but like we just got in on it and I was so excited we had to do it. Back me up though. How did you end up here? How are you, out here helping people with team development, with core values, with, getting the right team on board with the techniques for this, with going through this introspective work? How did you arrive here? How is Sheri here saving the world through making entrepreneurs know themselves?
Okay. Well, since we're already deep, I'll go there and then we'll lighten up. From a very young age, I knew that what was going to be important to me was ensuring that other people felt seen and heard, and they knew that they mattered. I had some challenges in my upbringing where I didn't feel that way. And I could look in retrospect to see even though that was hard, what a gift it is for adult me, that I had the experience of not feeling heard and seen and really understanding that I mattered. And so wanting to ensure that I was able to give that to other people, because I truly believe that. So that's the origin. And then let's lighten it up from there. I have a degree in exercise physiology. Movement has always been a passion of mine, from dance to playing rugby in college, just knowing that movement has supported sanity when it comes to my mental health. And I chose that degree because I wanted to educate people that there's something out there that you can find to move your body to be able to support yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. Fast forward to professional career. I worked in parks and recreation for a long time, got my start there in leadership. And then I would say like a big time stamp in my professional career, I was hired with an organization called Core Power Yoga back in 2004. I went through their teacher training. And as soon as I graduated, they offered me a management role. So I managed a studio. So everyone who's listening, I've been there, done that. Started managing one single studio that had 2 practicing rooms at the time. And I got so many gifts in those first couple of years. The biggest one being my first mentor when it comes to the yoga space. He gave me so much space to thrive and fly, as well as so much generous space to fail. He was like, you want to do this? Go do it. We need this, go do it. And there was so much conversation around what support I needed, what I learned from the experience versus feeling like I ever did fail. And so I feel like that was one lesson I took with me all along the way, like how much confidence that built in me and how much depth of experience I got because he saw that I loved writing, the creative side of creating programs, my ability to train other people. So I got to manage a studio and create programs and travel to train other people on them and lead teacher trainings. And it goes back, we'll just pin that back to find out what your people are interested in because they will stay. And I did stay. I stayed for a decade. So I was with Core Power, one studio, and then they asked me to move to Chicago. I opened up 6 studios there in Chicago, led teacher trainings, led all the programming, was everything from maintenance to HR to contract manager, everything in between. And then I got to move to California, do the same thing. I oversaw 11 studios in California as the regional manager. And so I'll pause there for a moment to tell you what I loved and how I got here, which was I needed my team. 11 studios, about 200 plus part-time yoga teachers. We were at the time the largest region in the company. So our biggest producing studio was seeing like 500, 600 students a day. And that was just one of them. I needed my team and I needed them to feel trained, seen, supported, like they can grow. And that's where I really found my passion, which was individually understanding what was important to them, what barriers they put up in their own way, so I could come in and make connection there and offer them support and help them see the vision for their future. Because a lot of times new managers in roles, they're just narrowed in on what's happening today versus giving them the inspiration of this is what I see. Like this is what I see in your personality and your skill set and your strength to give them the boost of confidence to say, I'm doing this now and here's the path that I could walk. So it's still such a highlight in my professional career was the 10 years that I spent there because I got so many experiences and I met so many people and I got to travel a lot, which is something that I'm passionate about. And then the last part of my career is today. So I left Core Power after the 10 years, not knowing really what was next. And what happened next was the relationships that I had then brought me to this career, which was, hey, I miss our mentorship. Can we meet? Hey, I'm opening this business. Can we sit down and talk? I'm in this stage in my career and I want something different. Can we set up a coaching session? So little by little, it started to reveal itself that, oh, what I knew I was really good at, which was listening, mentoring others, understanding strategy and execution, is something that people actually needed. So that has turned into the coaching business that I have.
So pretty organic that it just like you arrived here because you developed the skill set.
Didn't feel like it at the time, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. On a personal level, I mean, how do you, because by the sounds of it, people are coming to you because they really have some problems, like on a more deeper, emotional, energetic, personal level. So how do you as an entrepreneur keep yourself healthy from that? How do you not take on your client's shit, basically?
I wish I could say I was really great at that, Josh.
Like, I do take it on.
I do, and I have to watch it. I do, and I have to watch it. It's definitely something that that I have to be mindful of, because I truly deeply care about everybody I work with. Like, I'm once we're in a relationship, you're on my mind a lot. So how I care for myself is just ritualistic practices daily. I get up early. I meditate. This morning, I always move in the morning. So today I went to my local rec center, did my strength training workout, and then sat in the sauna for 20 minutes afterwards, knowing that I had clients today. I had this amazing podcast today. I have a massage later on today. So knowing what helps energy move in me is important. That's movement, meditation, my yoga practice, hands-on like massage practices on a monthly basis, acupuncture later this week. Those are the things that I know really work. And then practically, Josh, when I am in good practice, my clients are very clear on my boundaries. I had to figure out what they were and then consistently hold true to them, which are my working hours, which are highlighted every single time I onboard a client, how they can interact with me in terms of email communication, text and polos, what time will look like in between our sessions and what's okay and what's not okay. Because I tend to hold such generous space for people, I had to start narrowing that in just a little bit.
Yeah. Having that boundaries, I think, is something I had to go. I think every entrepreneur has to, but especially in coaching, I had to go through that too, where it was like, you do care. I mean, really, the success of me as a coach is based on your success as my client. So you really do give a shit, and you become personally involved with the, like, on a more friendly level when you're coaching an entrepreneur. So boundary setting becomes fundamental. But I like what you're saying about a regular, like having that ritualistic movement practice too. I think that I see often studio owners, for example, that's why they start owning the studio. They're like, well, I want to do yoga every day, but then like they stop doing that. And it becomes a real problem. You're like, hey, the solution is pretty simple. Like, you own the studio. You should practice every day when you're in there.
Yeah. And permission, if anybody needs to hear this, like, I personally think it's okay not to practice at your studio in addition to practicing at your studio.
Yes.
I liked being anonymous, being able just to show up and not worry about like the dust bunnies in the corner or what music was playing, who checked in who, and just go and have a teacher that I trusted for a practice outside of giving feedback and
totally. Yeah, to be able to flip the switch off, you go somewhere, you're like, I'm just going to do the yoga class and cover the rest. In the town that I live in here, when we first were here, I was teaching as well. And I no longer teach here on the regular because I need to have a practice here. And what would happen is, it's very floofy beach yoga stuff here. So it was very common to go in to take a class and end up teaching the class. So it's like, no, that's it. I'm just not on the roster. I'm just going to practice. You mentioned that it didn't feel so organic and easy growing the business, but maybe even beyond that comment right now, what do you struggle with in your business and your business growth? And yeah, what's the hard part?
A few things. Personally, my client business can't sustain my business goals for a few reasons. I don't have enough hours in the day based on what I charge clients. And energetically, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to see clients all day long. It would be a lot. So knowing that I have to have multiple revenue streams. Luckily, I took the time to figure out how to ensure that they all informed one another versus being very separate in terms of my attention. So my coaching business, I lead several retreats per year. And then I do speaking engagements and lead workshops. So those are my 3 revenue streams. So a challenging part of the business is just consistently staying disciplined to spend time in each, because my attention and my interest tends to go towards one over the other on any given month or quarter. So knowing that I had to create, I create monthly goals. They're really clear goals in terms of number of new clients, number of, ongoing consistent clients, workshops that I'm planning, retreat revenue that's coming in. Like, it just takes, as any entrepreneur, owner of a business knows, there has to be a system. You have to be disciplined, and there has to be consistency with that, which I'm all on board for. And it's still difficult. It's still difficult to find the balance of those things amidst the other fullness of my life. We were talking pre-recording about my September, and all of those things needed to happen. And kids started back at school and activities. My husband was traveling, and we had some other things pop up. So it's just like, knowing that that's just going to be a part of life, and at your best opportunity, regrounding into that, which I'm doing right now. So that's difficulty number 1, which is going to be ongoing for the business. And then 2, challenging parts of the business for me are staying clear on what matters most. I feel so lucky, Josh. There's so many things that I love to do, and they're all within the realm of wellness and coaching and entrepreneurship. But I like the shiny lights. Like, something comes my way, I'm like, yes, and yes, and I'm going to do this and this and this. So a difficult thing for me, a challenging part of my business, is taking enough time to pause with an idea that comes up, because I fluctuate between visionary and integrator, like all these great ideas. I see a need and I want to fill it, versus taking the time to pause to go, why do I want to fill it? Is there somebody else who could be doing it? And if it is a yes from me, what is the best timing based on what's already on my plate, so that I'm not in a state of overwhelm or overcommitment, and I could just stay focused on what I've already prioritized.
Yeah. Preach. I have the same issue. The shortage of inspiration and ideas has never been my problem ever. It's always deciphering what to actually go after, and then the discipline to stay the course before moving to the next thing. Maybe that's a good problem to have, but I've always really respected or idolized people who are hyper disciplined, who can stay the course on like one thing for a really long time.
Yes.
Because I'm like, I never felt like that's a natural proclivity that I've had. So
Same.
not that I don't have the ability, but it's just a struggle for sure. I love it. I think it's good to hear that like at every level of business, with every type of business, I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's a normal occurrence, but being able to articulate it for yourself is in itself part of the solution.
The lucky part is, and maybe this is for you too, Everything I just shared, I regularly coach my clients on, of like, these are the important things, right? To
Yeah.
be able to look at your quarter, determine what matters most, what is going to be the best use of your energy, to create a plan to take that from concept to completion and consistently follow through with that. So I get to say this regularly. I just finished giving client a feedback email on all of these same things. So it's just like reiterate. Yeah.
It's so true. I'm coaching people towards this stuff all the time. It's actually way easier to see it when it's not you and then coach someone towards it than it is to stay implementing on it for yourself.
Like, oh, I'm doing that too. Okay.
As an entrepreneur, you have a vast array of experiences and different people across different markets and everything else. What is something that you've run into in the business world that you just maybe disagree with, or you have a controversial different opinion on?
The first thing that popped up was, I'm thinking of a client right now, and one of the things that is always said in conversation is, we're just too busy. We're just too busy to train. Right? That they run at such a quick pace that there's not enough time to slow down, to do the development or do the feedback. That, like you said before, it's just easier to know that somebody's going to cycle through and the next person's going to come. And I always just sit with that because it's an industry that I used to work in. And so I have some experience in this industry. There's a quick pace industry, restaurant industry. And I still disagree. And I think it's really hard to make that switch of going from such a quick pace and being able to say, and this is still important. And we have to slow things down to make time for this. That something is going to have to move out of the way so we could put this towards the top of 1 hour of planning time a day, 1 hour of setting goals per week, versus feeling like at some points this pace will slow down and then we'll get to it.
Right. Man, is that ever true? Every business I've ever owned, and the majority of owners that I've talked to, would say something to the effect of, there's like this light at the end of the tunnel. When this, then I can do that. If this, then I can do that. And you just don't ever get there. Mm-mm. It's like until you're like, no, I'm going to make the decision that this is happening. Right. Rather than you check some boxes and suddenly you have so much time. The future seems to have so much time for people, but it doesn't. It's the same amount of time. Yeah. I love that. All right. Final question, for today, because obviously we could keep going in circles on this for a long time, but now looking back, you've got this experience, what does Sheri 2023 tell Sheri in 2015 about being an entrepreneur and any of this? What's something you wish you knew then that you understand now?
So many things. And actually I just got emotional thinking about it. I think patience with the highs and lows, as a solo business owner, like it takes time to develop some things, revenue cycle of things, when you feel like you're at such a great pace and you're making an impact. And then, it could be like 2 days later that you're settling in and you're like, what am I doing with my life? So just knowing that cycle, whether it be as a business owner or as a human being, like that's just going to be the thing, and not to hold on to anything too tightly. I would say that's number one. What I would tell myself that many years ago is to remember and not dismiss your known strengths. Connection is my main strength. If I look at every single major milestone that has happened in my professional career as well as my personal, it goes back to the theme of connection. Like my ability to develop relationships with other people and sustain them, to be able to ensure that people know that they matter, that they're heard, they're listened to, and that's enough. Like versus like grabbing for these other things that I aspire when I see other people and going, this strength, this value of mine, this natural innate characteristic is what your business is based upon. And that's enough. And then to create action solely based on that. So when I am in a great place, Josh, when it comes to like looking at my business and developing it, it's all about networking for me. Like you won't see me online, friends, like, doing marketing campaigns. I love it when I see people do that. I aspire towards that. And networking, referrals, connecting with clients, testimonials, like that's how my entire business has been generated. So like knowing and trusting that that's enough is something I would tell my younger self. And lastly, and I feel like you put this maybe in our conversation notes to each other, to very early on define what success means to me and to ensure that my life is aligned with that, my business is aligned with that. Because if you were to ask me, like based on your definition of success, is your business a success? And I would say without hesitation, 100%. Because my definition of success is personal freedom, like time freedom, working from my home office, going to go see my son's soccer practice, taking time off anytime I want to, traveling when I need, having the financial freedom based upon doing things that I love doing, and that's not somebody else is tasking me to do, is my definition of success. And that's what I'm doing every single day. So for people to early on define that, because there's going to be moments where you question your success. And if you could go back to that and then recalibrate your action and your mindset towards that, I feel like it's key.
That's a good one. I love it.
Thanks.
My friends, this has been fun.
Oh my God.
I have 100 million more questions, but we're going to save them for a future episode, I think.
Love it.
How do people get in touch with you? If they're like, this sounds great, I want to reach out, maybe let's work together. What's the best way for them to do that?
You could find me via my website, which is shericolosimo.com. I'm sure you'll link my spelling to that. And then on there, you could book coaching. You could sign up for my blog, which has monthly inspiration. And then I also post on Instagram on a monthly basis, which is at Sheri Colosimo.
I love it. Predefined expectations. You will see a monthly post from me on Instagram.
Yeah.
So good. So good. My friend, this has been really awesome. I appreciate all your insights and getting to hear your story. And we'll be in touch again in the future.
Thanks, Josh.